You know what's strange? We talk endlessly about millennials and Gen Z. We argue about boomers. But there's an entire generation that just exists somewhere in the middle. Almost invisible. Almost forgotten. Generation X. People born roughly between 1965 and 1980. And here's what nobody tells you. Their psychology was shaped during one of the strangest decades of the 20th century. The 70s. When the old world was already falling apart and the new one hadn't quite been born yet. Picture this. 1973. You're 10 years old. You come home from school, pull a key out of your pocket, and unlock the front door. The house is silent. Mom's not home. Dad's not home. Just you, the refrigerator, and a TV with 3 channels. No smartphones. No cameras. Nobody checking if you're okay. You heat up your own food. You do your homework alone. You figure it out. Research shows that by 1980, millions of children across America were regularly spending after-school hours without a single adult present. Psychologists called them Latchkey Kids. And that key wasn't just a piece of metal. It became a symbol for an entire generation. A symbol that the only person you could truly count on was yourself. One, the 70s taught them that adults don't always know what they're doing. Watergate. The oil crisis. Inflation eating away at savings right before their eyes. Children watched their parents, people who had done everything right their whole lives, worked hard, paid their taxes, suddenly find themselves powerless against circumstances nobody saw coming. Psychologists call this the collapse of the authoritative narrative. When the system you were told was reliable cracks right in front of you, your brain permanently changes how it responds to promises. That's why people of Generation X aren't cynics. They simply saw the truth earlier than they were ready for it. 2. Boredom built something in them that most people today have completely lost. There was no internet in the 70s. No video games. No endless scroll. There was the backyard. There was the public library. There was your own mind. When you're genuinely bored and there's no one around to entertain you, you start to think. Really think. Cognitive psychologists call this the state of mental free wandering, and it's exactly where imagination is born, where unconventional problem-solving develops, and where the ability to be alone without anxiety is quietly formed. Generation X spent thousands of hours in that state, and it permanently rewired the architecture of how they think. 3, they learned to fix things because there was no other option. Bike chain came off? Fix it yourself. TV acting up? Read the manual and figure it out. In the 70s, calling a repairman cost money that most families simply didn't have. So kids of that generation understood early that the physical world responds to whoever is willing to put in the time. Researchers call this mechanical intuition. A deep internal confidence that most problems are solvable if you're not afraid to get your hands dirty. That's exactly why people of Generation X still can't quite understand why someone would call a repairman just to change a light bulb. 4, the 70s taught them to stay quiet about the things that mattered most. This was a time when adults didn't discuss problems with their children. Financial stress, family conflict, fear about the future. All of it existed behind closed doors. Kids felt the tension, but nobody explained where it was coming from. Psychologists call this learned emotional stoicism. When nobody around you talks about their struggles out loud, you learn to keep yours to yourself, too. That's the origin of Generation X's reputation as people who handle things quietly. Who don't complain? Who solved the problem without turning it into a whole event? 5. They grew up understanding that good times can end without warning. The oil crisis of '73 hit out of nowhere. Gas lines. Power outages. Adults talking about how everything had gotten too expensive. A child who sees this at a conscious age draws a conclusion that stays with them forever. Stability is an illusion. Not because the world is cruel, just because that's how life works. Research in behavioral economics shows that people who experienced economic shocks in childhood are more likely throughout their entire lives to keep an emergency fund, maintain multiple income streams, and hold a deep distrust of any promise that guarantees permanent stability. Here's what the children of the 70s eventually became: people who don't wait for someone else to come and fix things, who solve problems quietly and effectively, who don't need approval to keep moving forward, who know how to be alone without falling apart. They're often called cold, distant, too independent, but the truth is something else entirely. These are people that life trained to be reliable at a time when there was nothing else to hold on to. They don't look for recognition. They just do the work. And maybe that's the most honest description of an entire generation. The kids who grew up with a key around their neck have spent their whole lives opening doors themselves. If this video hit home for you or reminded you of someone you love, subscribe to the channel. Because here we don't just talk about psychology. We explain why people became exactly who they are.